He's someone who's sought out by elite athletes from around the world, including athletes from the NFL, the NHL, and the MLB. He has a career as a record-breaking natural powerlifter, and today he's going to be talking about dietary fatty acids. You hear a lot about the differences between polyunsaturated fats and saturated fats, and monounsaturated fats. And he's going to be talking to you guys about the differences and explaining how these can impact your health and performance. So Dr. Eric Serrano, take it away.
Okay, welcome everybody. I have a bunch of slides and it's up to Remo to give it to you guys. So I don't care if you guys have them. I don't like to read my own slides, so I prefer you guys to be able, if you read something on the slide that I didn't say, ask me. The reason I pick fats is because me and the guys were talking about, how would I say, about fats. And I asked them some questions and they did not know the answer. So I said, well, I'm going to talk about fats. So I call the lecture what you don't know, but you need to know about fats. I'm going to go and try to explain. Before I do this, I want anybody that is a vegetarian or a dietitian in this mode of Zoom listening. If you are one of those people, I don't like you. I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to have arguments, we're going to fight, but that's okay. I'm willing to fight with you anytime, anywhere, and discuss with you and change you to the real world. Nemo, next slide. The reason I'm doing this and I present this slide here is because most people look at research and they say there's 4 versus 3. But when you look at the slide, some people are going to say 3, some people are going to say 4. I am trying to stop that confusion because I want to give you the truth behind anything. I don't want you to say, oh, the people on this side say this, the people say that. No, I want to give you the true facts. I'm not going to mince words. And it's not based on research. This is based on cases I see in my office every day. This is based also in real life. Here, you're going to learn why the saturated fats. These are the questions that you need to ask yourself because people do teach you this. Does saturated fat cause heart disease? Do you want to use vegetable oil? Does eating fat make you fat? Does oil pulling work? Before I answer all these questions, I want to tell you that I have done all the research for you, and I have tried to condense it and make it easier for you so you understand. I know I put this cartoon here because, of course, somebody's going to piss me off during the lecture, and then I'm going to go on a tangent, but that's okay. I want to say that if you have any question during the lecture, go ahead and ask. I don't know how Nemo does this, but hopefully I'll be able to answer all your questions. I have a board behind me that I hope that everybody will be able to see. If somebody asks me a question, I like to move around because I cannot sit down. So hopefully there'll be no problems. Next slide. Okay, the reason I put this picture here is because most people think, oh, fats, carbohydrates. No. If you guys see the little like yellow pellets on top of the cell are carbohydrates. So they are glycoproteins and there's some phospholipids that are joined that pinch a carbohydrate between. But if you look at the cell, it almost composed of all fat. There's proteins between for pores, entrance, and doors, but most of the cell is fat. Now, note that this is called the cell wall membrane. Now there's a theory or a hypothesis that the cell membrane is actually totally fluid, that it changes shapes and everything. And based on electron microscope, they see that. So on the old days, we used to believe that was a structure that was pretty basic, stable. But now we're finding out that it completely changes, but it's composed of mostly fat. We need fat to be alive. Next slide. I have learned more from my failures than my success. The reason I say that is when I started medicine, I always said that, well, I was taught by the drug industry and the food industry. And I used to say carbohydrates are the best. And, to lose weight, you need to carbohydrates. Well, I learned pretty fast that I was lying to my patients and I needed to sit down and read. And I started reading and I started applying the science behind my reading, my research to the real life. And then when I fail, I change. Now, note that I have failed many times, but thankfully I've been successful many times. This is a book that I'm going to highly recommend. It's called Know Your Fats by Mary Egnick. It's an excellent book. It has a long list of almost everything you want to know that I'm going to explain to you today. It is not as research oriented as I wanted, but it's a very great basic book. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to start with dietary fat. Okay, we have veins, arteries, and capillaries. And we people think those are the most abundant right now. And in reality, no, God gave us a highway for dietary fat. God gave us the limbs. There's more limbs than arteries and veins put together. Let me repeat what I'm going to say. I know people say, oh, I'm going to eat low fat. Well, why would God give you, number one, a highway only for fat? Why would God give you an organ just to digest fat, by the way? And that organ is called the gallbladder. Now, dietary fats compose hormones. 50% of the hormones are made out of fat or cholesterol, to be exact, by the way. So watch out with that cholesterol, right? There's vitamins. For example, vitamin D is a full cholesterol, it's a fat, A, D, and K. Energy, our energy, almost all of it will come from fat. If you're sitting down and listening to this lecture, are you burning carbohydrates or are you burning fat? I want the answer at the end of the lecture. They compose the structure. They create essential fatty acids. Our bones are made out of fat, not of calcium. The outside, the shell is made out of calcium, but the inside is absolutely fat. That's what you call the bone marrow. That's when you cook a bone or make soup, you cook the bones so the fat comes out. It's used for protection against around the organs. It allows you to taste good food. Beef without fat tastes awful. Next slide, Nemo. Okay, I divided on this slide is the only scientific slide that I'm going to use because I want to make sure that you guys do understand that for physicians or researchers, there are different ones. They're called fatty acids, which you guys will know a lot, like many fatty acids, just a construction of fats put together. Triglycerides, which are one glycerol and three fats. Phospholipids are fat that contain phosphates, okay? Steroids are fats that contain cholesterol, and glycolipids are ones that contain glycogen. On this slide, I will classify the first one, the fatty acids. They're short chain fatty acids, they're medium chain fatty acids, and they're long chain fatty acids, right? Now, when we talk about long fatty acids, we talk about monounsaturated, saturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats. For you guys who don't know what that means is the carbon chain, and I want to say that we are a bunch of cars in a parking lot together. And in one of those cars, there's one person sitting in one car. That's a monounsaturated fatty. It has a person in it. He has a double bond carbon. If you have many people sitting on those cars, that's a polyunsaturated fat. We have many double carbons. And if you don't have anybody sitting inside the car, that's a saturated fat. They don't have a double bond. Now, those bonds are really important because those bonds decide how stable the fat is in heat, cold, whatever. But also how easily they oxidize. And if you see on the slides, and I hope people can see on the slide, the polyunsaturated fats consist of linoleic, alpha-linolenic, EPA, and DHA. All those are considered polyunsaturated fat. And if you go see the linoleic, which is the omega-6, by the way, are a high substantial portion of what we call eating oils. You see that as corn, soybeans, sunflower, etc. If you go to the monounsaturated fat, and by the way, most monounsaturated fats are omega-9, meaning they have a double bond on carbon number 9. That's what that means, okay? So when they say W6, W3, that means where the first carbon is, okay? Or how many carbons do they have? On the first one, you see saturated fats are cocoa butter, nut butter, palm, tallow, okay? And omega-9s, you can see goose fat, lard, macadamia, olive oil, peanuts, etc. Next slide, please. Here, I divided again to be more specific so you know. For example, palmitic acid used to cook popcorn, okay? And it is a great oil to cook popcorn because it was stable, it wouldn't get damaged. Most people now use the polyunsaturated fats because they want you to have low saturated fats. Well, I'm going to prove to you guys that using polyunsaturated fats is wrong. Next slide. Okay, how many people in this lecture have know any vegetable oils? I hope that people have some answer. And I want to ask you, which vegetable oils do you know? And the answer is none. There's no vegetable oils whatsoever. I hate the industry, but they have eaten the little brain cells of people out there, even of the experts, and said, yes, you do have vegetable oil. No, you don't. I've never seen broccoli vegetable oil. I had never seen, let me think, what? Give me an example of one vegetable. I don't see any. Oils come from fruit, seeds, grains, and legumes. So peanuts are legumes. Seeds, sunflower. Macadamia nuts. Grains, corn. Corn is a grain, corn oil. Fruits, avocado, coconut oil. They don't exist. There's no vegetable oils. Okay, I want you guys to be aware of that. Now, I do this because the peanut butter oil. That's how we get peanut butter. Now, I'm just messing with you guys. But peanut butter is not a good fat. Now, this is a very interesting slide. And the reason I put this here is because people want to know, okay, what percent of the fatty acids are what? Are they polyunsaturated and they're monosaturated fat? What is the content of those fats? So for example, if people know what beef tallow is the fat that comes from the beef. People say, oh, that's saturated fat. No, you guys are wrong. 48% of that big chunk of fat, it is a monosaturated fat, believe it or not. Butter is actually even has some monosaturated fat. So be aware that the fat is incredible. Vegetable oils, canola, olive is 78%, palm oil. Next slide. You guys can read that. Okay, this is a paper that came out, I forgot what year it was, and it showed what happened with resistant exercise, testosterone, cortisol, and fat intake. And I marked the yellow component. I don't know if you guys can see that. When the percent of energy of protein always protein, there's a decrease on your testosterone levels. When you use mono, and let me repeat that, monosaturated fat or saturated fat, the testosterone levels went up, which is incredible. People have no understanding. Now know that testosterone is made out of cholesterol. Next slide. I put the avocado oil, and the reason I put this slide here is because avocado has become a sensation right now of the oils. Now, avocado is very, very stable at high temperature. Next slide, because I want to make a comment. The reason it's very important is because avocado is more stable than all the other oils. The reason is because not only is high on monosaturated fat, but it's highly on medium chain fats. So it's very, very stable for heat. Next slide. Okay, this is what is going to blow your minds. Beef tallow that is completely fat. People think saturated fat is 54% unsaturated fat, which is crazy. Lard, which comes from the pig, no, it's not 100% saturated, 60% unsaturated. Chicken fat is 70% unsaturated. So the fat content depends on the animal's diet. Now, I want to say this, of the 54, the 60, and the 70%, which one is the most common fat? If it's not saturated fat, how come we don't eat beef? How come we don't eat pork? Because we're scared of the fat. This is interesting. Let me repeat that. 54, 60, and 70% of the fat on those animals is unsaturated. Next slide. This is going to give you the secret of life from now on. These are different cuts. Okay, there's beef, ribeye, skinless chicken, and the reason I put skinless chickens is because all the stupid bodybuilders that want to take the skin off, and they say, oh, I'm going to reduce my saturated fat intake, or I'm going to reduce this or that. Well, most people eat salmon because they think they want to have a low saturated fat food, which in the scheme of the world, it might be true, but it's not true. The total amount of fat is on the top. So it's funny because the beef top round steak had the least fat. You guys see that, 3.2 grams? And most people say, oh, it's saturated fat. But in reality, it's monosaturated fat. Every single fat that you see here, or every single animal, the highest percent is not saturated fat, is monounsaturated fats. So when the scientists tell you to eat low fat and eat polyunsaturated fat, they are wrong. We do not need to eat polyunsaturated fat. We need to eat monounsaturated fats. We need to eat fat, saturated fats. And if you see the olive oil, which that's why it's so great, is all monounsaturated fat, very minimal polyunsaturated fats, very minimal saturated fat. Next slide. Okay, omega-6 to 3 ratio in cattle. I raise my own cattle, and we give them grain just to make them fat the last 3 months. We give them a little scoop here and there, but we know that if we don't give them any grain, they don't get fat at all, and the meat is really hard, and it's hard, and we don't want that. When you corn-fed a cow or the cattle, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is 15 to 2. Yes, I did this myself, and actually the research is out there. When you grass-fed it 3 to 2, I wonder which one would increase your inflammation if you're eating shitty or good-fed cow. Now, it takes 30 days for the DHA and 60 for the EPA to become steady state. So if you have a cow that was being corn-fed, you said, okay, I want to change the ratio of that, then you don't feed the corn, you completely stop, and it will take 30 days to 60 days in a good area to change back to the ratio it's supposed to be. Next slide. Here, I put the most common oils, and the reason is I want you guys to learn how to identify which oil I need to do. If the oil is high on polyunsaturated fat, you never want to use it for cooking. Number one. Number two, I never want to have oils for fat. The reason is in nature, nothing has fat without what? Without proteins. The reason is because proteins are required to be digested. It takes a long time, so the fats slow down the digestive system. Now, the reason I put this slide originally was because I wanted to see the lies. They want you to eat canola oil. They want you to eat flaxseed oil. They want you to eat corn oil. Well, those are the highest important saturated fat. And what did I just show you about your steak, your salmon? No, what we need most is monounsaturated fat. And that's why the monounsaturated fats are so important. This slide, the oleic acid or the yellow one is the monounsaturated fat, which I will use sunflower oil. Yes, I can use it, but I prefer olive oil. Why? Because it's higher on saturated fat. Also, 75% is monounsaturated fat. You guys can see that. Next slide. This is what is happening now. Well, that's worse. I know you guys can see that. Next slide. Okay. I put some research papers to make sure that I did not just, I'm saying this, I want to show you papers that do show real things. I use Open Heart because it's one of the most read cardiology journals. And you guys can read the cardiometabolic consequences of replacing saturated fat with carbohydrates or omega-6. I want to say this, the more saturated fat that you eat and the less carbohydrate you eat, the better it is for your heart. The more omega-6 you eat, the worse it is for you, so be very careful with that. Next slide. Okay, this is a great paper, and most people don't talk about it, but this is a randomized controlled trial, which they use, okay, we're going to look at polyunsaturated fat in place of saturated fat. And if you guys look at this, the conclusion was, okay, these findings provide evidence that consuming polyunsaturated fats in place of saturated fats reduces coronary heart disease in random controlled trials. This suggests that lower polyunsaturated fat consumption through a greater consumption of polyunsaturated fats in place of will significantly reduce the rate of heart disease. This is crazy. The reason I put this slide and goes against what I'm telling you is these people say, if we put you on polyunsaturated fat, you're going to have less heart disease. Absolutely a lie. The way they did the research, it was absolutely baloney. They did, we're going to ask questions. We're going to say, you need to eat this way, you need to eat that way, and they follow the people. Actually, if you consider the methods, what they did is they took the effects of polyunsaturated fat consumption. Hold on, let me see, because I haven't seen this slide. I can barely see it on my, and they look at polyunsaturated fat and death. And they said that polyunsaturated fat consumption reduces death. That is absolutely a lie. Next slide. This thing is going to be. This is another one. Dietary intake of saturated fat by food by source and incidence of cardiovascular disease. And this one was in atherosclerosis. And this one was to prove that saturated fats were worse, but they found out that actually saturated fat was better. Next slide. Same thing again. This is a meta-analysis. Next slide. The same thing, saturated fat, trying to increase mortality, and they found out that it doesn't. Next slide. Fatty acid consumption, risk of fracture in the woman. Actually, here is the go to the next slide, because the next slide is much more important. This is one of the most important slides that you're going to have on this lecture. When some people that get fat, they come to you and tell you, I get really sick when I lose fat, and you say, oh, that's bullshit, you're fat, you don't want to lose the weight. But on this study, they did biopsies, and they looked at people that were obese versus endurance athletes, and they looked at the adipose tissue. When the adipose tissue was large, there was a high concentration actually of organochlorines, which is crazy. So on some people that are losing fat, absolutely, those people will get sick because you release organochlorine, pesticides, into the blood. The reason that some people get fat is because they have so many toxins that the fat starts. There's three ways to get rid of toxins: pooping, peeing, right? Or crying, or sweating. I'm messing with you guys. But that is the way to get rid of toxins, actually. Or you have to accumulate them because your body cannot keep up with your consumption. So in that case, the body will protect itself by creating fat against those toxins, keeping them away from the body. Next slide. Okay, this is cholesterol. I want to talk a little about cholesterol because oh my God, if your cholesterol is high, you're going to die. First thing I'm going to tell you is if your cholesterol is less than 250, let me repeat this number, less than 250, you have a higher chance of dementia, breast cancer, colon cancer, and you have a higher chance of death. So whoever tells you that you want a low cholesterol is dying. The longest living people always have high cholesterol levels. And again, I'm trying to show you how important it is. If my testosterone levels are low and cholesterol is high, I wonder, is it because my body wants to make more testosterone and I don't have the cofactors to make that? So my cholesterol goes to testosterone, but it requires niacin. Yes, niacin, high levels of niacin. I wonder how niacin lowers cholesterol. He said because it completely helps you metabolize it to what it needs to be metabolized. Interesting question. Now look at that. 50% of all the hormones are made out of the steroids. The other 50% are of cholesterol. The other 50% are made out of proteins. Next slide. The brain, 54% cholesterol. And most of that is including phospholipids. Do not believe that you need low cholesterol. This was done actually in Canada, and they look at the DH content of the retina, and they found out that the higher the retina, the DH content, the better it is. Next slide. This book was the #1 book for physicians. This guy is the surgeon, Randolph House. He said how bad are fish oils and how the research is alive. This is the #1 read book that was passed to doctors. And he says how fish oils are awful, how they do not work, how they should never be used. Next slide. This is a slide summarizing the same, it's just more extensive. I give you beef fat here so you can see what you're eating or drinking. He has butter fat there, so he tells you what the content is. Of course, butter is mostly saturated fat, of course, which is only the butter and coconut oil are the only two high saturated fat oils that you can find. Let me repeat that. The only two high saturated fat content in nature are coconut oil and butter fat. Next slide. This is just comparing the deficiency. If you have a deficiency on omega-6, you get like eczema, loss of hair. And I see a lot of specifically gamma-linolenic acid deficiency. And I also see a fish oil deficiency. Out there, there's no product that does one of the products that I'm going to show you today has a right combination of omega-6 and omega-3. Next slide. This is how it works. This is how alpha-linolenic acid and alpha-linolenic as it works. The linoleic is omega-6. So you have 18, that means I have 18 carbon, 2, and the first one is in the omega-6. That's what that means. Okay, be aware of that. Now, I want you to be aware that, no, next slide, it's fine. That when you're going through the conversion from linoleic acid that comes from flax, walnut, soy, pumpkin oil, you have to go through the chain to be converted to DHA and EPA. But note that all those are dependent on B6, B3, niacin. Here we go again, niacin. But if you drink alcohol, if you have trans fatty acids, like fake fats, right? If you drink a lot of caffeine, you have diabetes, or as you age, that pathway is affected and you don't do as well. Next slide. Those are just many things that you can be the relationship between the fatty acids and your body. Next slide. This is a cool paper, and this paper actually was pulled out and then brought back because they didn't want to show you that omega-3 makes a big, huge difference in bipolar disorder. Now, most people drink or take fish oils and they 200 milligrams, 400 milligrams. If you want to take fish oils, you need 1,500 milligrams minimum. Do not call to your doctor and say, I'm taking it. If you're not taking between 1 to 2 to 3 grams, you're not doing anything. Next slide. Okay, this is a comparison here of how much arachidonic acid is involved in, which is an omega-6 in a skeletal muscle cell membrane. So do not take omega-6. It's the balance between them. Remember this, is the balance, is the imbalance that causes disease. Next slide. Again, here we go, omega-3, same thing. Next slide. That's showing how omega-3 is necessary. Next slide. This is in Canada. About 11% of the population can make their own DHA. The reason is they don't have the magnesium, they have the zinc, they drink caffeine, they have high sugar, etc. Next slide. Next slide, please. This is very, very cool slide. They look at DHA content of the mothers, okay, and the depletion. And this is on the blood, by the way. So the more children that the mother have, the worse the DHA of the mother is. The reason for that is because the child is a parasite. The children being born, they suck your blood. They're mosquitoes first, and they're big vampires. And as we get more children, the mother gets more depleted. That's why the mother has to have high content of fish oil during the pregnancy. As they have more subsequent child, they should take even more because it's not depression. Postpartum depression is more common. Here's the brain activity on a child that has no DHA and a child with or low DHA and a child with good DHA levels. Look at the difference between a child that has no fish oil, is not being breastfed correctly, or is using a poor formula, and that's what happens to that child's brain, poor development. Next slide. This is in vegan, vegetarians, and omnivores. That's how much polyunsaturated fat you can see on the milk. It's kind of interesting. The vegans have a lot there, but omnivores have more content of the important ones. Next slide. This is the comparison of breast milk, okay, to a formula that was removed from the market because it was too expensive to make. The reason they removed it is because they follow exactly what breast milk is. And if you see, you're going to go, what is the most abundant fatty acid on milk? And you're going to say, oh, it looks like polyunsaturated fat or mono. Absolutely not. There's more saturated fat, medium, intermediate, long chain. There's much more than monosaturated fat. But actually, eventually, monosaturated fats will be more than the saturated fats. Go ahead. This is just a comparison how the pregnancy, the fat is very important. Next slide. This is a breakdown of omega-3 index. They look at the structure of the red blood cell and they look at how much is, what percent is omega-3, and you require about 5.4% more. This is a great test, and it's offered by Merck. You can take this test. Hey, I want an omega-3 index. I want to know what it is. Just ask them to do it for you. Next slide. Next slide. These are all papers. I put vitamin E function here because remember ADEK, A, D, E, and K. Vitamin E is the most important vitamin for cholesterol in the sense that vitamin E helps you make a hook to the LDL that binds to the cell. So when your vitamin E levels are low, your LDL level might be high. Now, when I'm talking about vitamin E, in the United States, they use D-L-alpha tocopherol as the vitamin E. That is not vitamin E. That is a fake vitamin E. It doesn't work. You need to take all the tocotrienols. You need to take the gamma tocopherols. You need to take all of them to make a difference. Next slide. That's just showing how the interaction between vitamin E, it's alpha tocopherol red, and the saturated fat or polyunsaturated fat. Excuse me. Calorie restriction. This is basically telling you that low caloric and ketogenic diet helps you against cancer. Next slide. They say how combining ketogenic diet, high fat diet with resistance training is better for you. Next slide. This is huge study by Maturitas, which is one of the biggest OBGYN, I would say, journals. And they look at ketogenic diet for people for enhancing fertility. The reason I specifically put this paper here is because when I did OB for 9 years, and I had a patient here that was 48 years old, she was perimenopausal, still having periods, but on and off. They have been trying artificial AI, they tried sperm, they tried everything. And they came to talk to me, and she was a little heavy, and I said, you need to go in a low starch, high ketogenic diet, but to lose weight. When they came back 4 months later, the husband came first, and he was very angry at me. He was screaming at me. Why? Why now? How do you know? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. This is all your fault. And I'm looking at him and said, what are you talking about? He said, my wife is pregnant. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's my fault. I'm going to tell you right now. And he brought his wife in, but he wanted to come in first and ask me questions. How in the hell did she get pregnant after trying and failing everything, in vitro, AI, everything? How can she be pregnant now? And I said, the change of diet makes a huge difference. She has fats now. She carried the fats on certain places that she requires to do it. She got rid of the bad fats, and the body was able to be healthy, no stress, and able to get pregnant. By the way, that child was named Eric. He's 17 years old now. Next slide. Ketogenic diets doesn't affect strength if you do it correctly. Next slide. The fat spectrum that give you from medium chain to polyunsaturated fats. Basically what I've been teaching you all night. Next slide. Nervonic acid. This is another type of it's not a polyunsaturated, it's a fat saturated, I say monosaturated fat actually, and have been shown to decrease schizophrenia or psychosis. It's going to be soon. It's going to be a supplement. So be aware of that you learn here. Next slide. Pumpkin seed oil for all those bald-headed guys out there. This is funny. You consume pumpkin oil, your hair grows up, or you can apply on your head, of course. I mean, the paper was very good, but don't get your hopes up. Next slide. This is in different oxidation of dietary fats in humans. In which order do you burn the fat? Do you burn the fat by size? Yes. Do you burn the fat by not only the size, but the number of saturated fat? The shorter the saturated fat, the faster you burn it. The longer the saturated fat, the slower you burn it. But if there are two fats, let's suppose there are 2 10 fats, but one has a double bond, that fat will be burned fast. So be aware of that. That's why some people tell you having polyunsaturated fat is better. Now, this is interesting. This is fatty oxidation after taking a meal, either in cold or hot water. So temperature makes a difference how you burn. That's why coffee makes you burn fat. Next slide. Mastication. This is a huge one. If I want to gain weight, do I eat peanut butter or do I eat peanuts? They are not the same. This is one, that's a huge myth. Do not eat peanut butter. Do not eat macadamia butter. Do not eat cashew butter if you want to lose weight. If you want to lose weight, you have to have the nuts because you have to chew them. It changes the absorption and the usage of the fat. It is crazy. It is right on that paper. It's really cool paper. It tells you why it happens. So chewing versus ingesting the butter is totally different. What will make you gain weight? What will make you lose weight? This one compared to the 12, this was pretty cool because they smell and they follow up daily, and they said that the higher dietary fat, the least fat you have. Next slide. Gender different in skeletal muscle. Women burn more fat. Oh, surprise, surprise. Depends on the period. Next slide. This is just talking about how mono and fish oils can prevent metabolic syndrome. Next slide. This slide basically, I want to stay here a little bit. Comparing reduced energy diets, so low calorie diet, either with high carbohydrates, low in fat, low carbohydrate, and high in fat. And the people that were in the low carbohydrate, high fat, they lose more weight. Next slide. Here is the extreme of both diets. The Dean Ornish diet that said that save your life. The Dean Ornish diet is very interesting. It will save your life because you have 2 hours of meditation a day. If you have 2 hours in your day that you can sit your ass on a toilet and think about how good your life is and everything is pretty, you will reduce your chance of dying. Of course that will happen. It doesn't matter what you eat. You have 2 hours to relax. Well, he didn't take that into the factor. The Pritikin diet, there was a lot of depression during that diet. The extreme is the Atkins diet, which most people, but now the carnivore diet is even more extreme, and they absolutely work, but it depends on the person. Next slide. These are just references for you to look about oil pulling. Oil pulling is when you put it on your mouth, you go back and forth with it, you spit it out or swallow it. Well, they have done study with oil pulling. When you do it, especially coconut oil, it actually prevents bad breath. It kills the bacteria. It does wonders for you. It actually stops plaque. It's all there. Next slide. Flaxseed is highly oxidized. So those people that consume flaxseed oil in liquid, not the capsules, in liquid is highly oxidized. So when you buy flaxseed oil, buy it on capsules. If you open it, put it on the fridge, it will get oxidized. Next slide. This is how the oil turns toxic. Okay, this aldehydes, coconut butter. As you can tell, the higher the saturated fat content, the least toxic they are. Next slide. This is some fats make your fat cells bigger. Some fats make your cell multiply. Guess which ones make you multiply? Of course, the corn oils. Those are the worst ones. Now, which fat makes your fat cell get bigger and eventually get smaller? Fish oil, believe it or not. Because they're deficient, they increase on size, and then when they get enough what they need, they go down on size. But the polyunsaturated fats make you grow bigger, more cells, fat cells. Next slide. Okay, body fat burning. That's pretty straightforward. All we know high intensity is going to burn more calories from fat, from slow. Now, diet is dependent on disease, goals, the season, location, economics, sex, race, religion, activity levels, genetics, and age. Next slide. This is my pyramid. This is all. Not anymore happens like that, but if you see proteins are first, including eggs, I don't include cheese, vegetables, nuts, meat products, grains, carbohydrate activities. Carbohydrates are activity dependent. Next slide. This is the oil I was talking, it's called alpha omega-3. I designed this oil based on the literature. And I eventually changed these oils because initially omega-6 are the most abundant still in our body. But we have an imbalance, remember omega-3. When I started the oils, I was doing research and I said, well, I have more omega-6, more omega-6 in the form of GLA. So I did it with a purpose. But as the research came out, I changed the formula and it has more monounsaturated fat, fish oils, and omega-6. Next slide. Basically, it tells you how fat alters, how the type of fat can alter your fuel oxidation. It's all there. I don't need to read it. Next slide. This is my power of life, gut, family, economics, and health. Now, if I go to the next slide, you're going to see that those pies become smaller because family have friends that are considered family. Nutrition and exercise are part of your health. And economics is going to be dependent on your work and education. So you need to take that into consideration. And next slide, please. And you are the books you read, the films you watch, the music you listen, the people you meet, the dreams you have, the conversation you engage in. So if you hang with a loser, you're a loser. If you hang out with a winner, you're a winner. Basically, that's what that means. But God always comes first. Next slide, please. No, just pass that. Thank you. Any questions? I hope that I went pretty fast because I know it's late for Nemo. I hope that I make your understanding of fats better and more accurate than it was. Any questions today or tonight?
Thank you so much, Dr. Serrano. We do have a few questions I was going to go through.
Shoot.
First, one commentator is asking for more clarification around your recommendations for vitamin E.
Yes, I will absolutely. Okay, I hope that you guys can see. Can you guys see the board?
Yes, we can.
Okay, vitamin E has different components. Okay, there's a little plant called annatto. Okay, it's super high on vitamin E's. It has all the vitamin E's. You have the coffeol, trocotinols, everything. So when you buy vitamin E, you cannot buy the DL. Do not ever buy that. You need to buy one that has all the fats. I use a company called Poliquin that has ADEC. It has the vitamin A, the vitamin D, and the vitamin K. It has all the vitamin E's. There are other companies. Solgar says one that has all the vitamin E's is excellent also.
I'm a big fan.
One more company. Excuse me?
Life Extension makes a mixed tocopherol, tocotrienol.
Yes, they do too. Thank you, Nemo. They make a good one too. So any of those three will be. I like ADEC because I have vitamin A, vitamin D, and they all work together. But all the other ones are fine. Next question.
Yeah, I guess just to expand on that answer, I think what Dr. Serrano is saying is there's different isoforms of vitamin E. So you have the D-alpha tocopherol, and this is usually what's included in a lot of cheap multivitamins or cheap vitamin E products as a standalone. And instead, what you want to do is get a wide variety of these isoforms. One of the most important ones is the gamma tocopherol and the delta as well. So getting a good balance of these isoforms is important. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
We have another question here from Cameron, and he's asking if there's a significant difference between extra virgin olive oil versus regular olive oil.
Yes, there is. That's a great question, Cameron. First of all, be aware that there's a huge influx of oils, at least in the United States, where they say virgin olive oil, which it wasn't. They were adding other oils to it. Extra virgin olive oil has a huge difference, not on the content of the fat, okay, not on the mono versus poly. So that's why it's easy, or on the polyphenols. The extra virgin oil has more polyphenols than the non-virgin oil. So if I were to spend my money, absolutely I would buy extra virgin olive oil.
Awesome. We have another question here. He was asking if you recommend cooking with beef tallow.
Who asked that question, Nemo?
That was Cameron.
I told Cameron, you're ahead of everybody. Beef tallow was the #1 consumed fat at one point in the United States, and they became less and less because the industry started saying, no, don't use it. So beef tallow and lard comes from the pig, by the way. So beef tallow. So so people know what beef tallow is. I don't know if they do know that. But beef tallow, when they collect the fat out of the cow and they render it, and that's beef tallow, and the lard the same way. Actually, I would prefer to cook with beef tallow or lard than to cook with any other oils. At my house, we use avocado oil to deep fry because it's easier. And if I have access to the beef tallow all the time, always beef tallow. Absolutely, it's not doesn't have a taste. It's neutral. It's excellent.
Great. And we have a question here from Hayden. He's asking what type of fish you recommend to include in the diet, and how much do you recommend per week?
Okay, you should always eat at least 3 times a week fish. Now, if we're talking United States, you have to stick with safe fish. Smaller fish, the better. Sardines are the best option for fish oils. Why? Because they're the smallest of the food chain, and they usually doesn't contain toxins or mercury. Salmon is the middle one that is pretty safe. Make sure that is wild caught. Tilapia, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one, is safe and decent. The rest, let me think about something that is safe. Those are the safest one that I can tell you. So if you eat sushi, if you're gonna eat sushi, use wild caught tuna or toro tuna. It's safer than the normal tuna. Shark, swordfish, all those have high content of mercury, so I would try to stay away from those.
Great. And we have a question here about cod liver oil. Is it something that you recommend?
In the old days, Nemo, is this funny? In the old days, what they did, they hand the fish up, right, Nemo? And the oil, they will dry the fish so the oil will drop down. As water evaporated, the oil will come down. And they watch that oil on the boat and they bottle that oil. That was called cod liver oil. That's why it sucked them. Now there are a lot of cod liver oils right now on the market that are decent. The problem with the oils, you have first, let me give you some rules about the oils. I never said that, or I should have said this. Never buy oils in a plastic bottle. Never, ever, ever. Always leaches the plastic. Number two, never buy oil that is not in a dark container. As soon as the light hits it and it's a monounsaturated fat, it will affect the oil. Now, dark is okay. Aluminum is okay. Can is okay. Do not buy in transparent bottles oil. It's always damaged. Unless it's saturated fat, beef tallow or butter or something like that. So be aware of that. I would say the majority of all the oils are oxidized when they're liquid. So cod liver oil, if it's usually in that, I seen barley salsa on a dark bottle, if I remember correctly, is okay. It's safe. It has vitamin D, it has vitamin E, has the oils, but I don't like to use the liquids unless in capsules. It's okay, but the liquid you take, I don't like it too much.
Thank you. Nick here, and we've actually had quite a few different commenters ask about the relationship between saturated fat intake and increases in LDL and how you kind of balance those two.
Okay, that is a great question. When actually, what raises your LDL more, polyunsaturated fats or saturated fat? That's the first question I want to ask you. And most people are going to say saturated fat. It is true because LDL is the transport of the fats of phospholipids around the area. Now, what is interesting is your vitamin E, if your hormones are okay, and your B vitamins, specifically niacin, are optimal, you really don't need it. Now, the most common reason for elevated LDLs is hyperinsulinemia or a high carbohydrate diet, okay, or a low chromium diet. The third one will be hypothyroidism, and the fourth one will be low testosterone levels, believe it or not. Now, 90% of the hormones made out of cholesterol are using LDL. So be aware of that. So you have a high diet on saturated fat and you have high LDLs, that means you're consuming also something else, so you have a deficiency of chromium. So be aware, if I'm eating a low high saturated fat, it's going to elevate your LDLs, but you shouldn't do it that much if you're not eating starch. If you're eating starches, it's going to go up.
Okay. And if LDL is primarily a transporter and isn't actually atherogenic on its own, are you someone who monitors ApoB instead?
Oh my God, great question, sir. I'm going to draw something here. When you eat the fats, they're called chylomicrons, right? Remember the limbs that I talk about? They make this molecule chylomicron, so phospholipid cholesterol. It goes down, increases the density, meaning there's more protein and less fat, and it goes. So this HDL. Now, Mr. Nemo is very smart, and I'm going to put a little mustache, Puerto Rican mustache there, and I'm going to put a little hook here. This ApoB, that's what Nemo was talking about. So let me tell you how the industry is. First of all, was cholesterol, right? Oh, cholesterol is bad for you. When they found out that they treated cholesterol, didn't change your death. Oh, no, it's not cholesterol. It's low HDL. Oh, we treated. Well, we cannot change HDL. Oh, body's LDL. Oh, we control LDL, but we lower it. Oh, we don't stop death. Damn it. Oh, then it's the particles, right? I know you guys hear that. They keep changing it because they all of them are wrong. So now Nemo has a ApoB and little lipoprotein A, LPA. Okay, let's talk about ApoB. ApoB is in all of them up to the LDLs, and then after the LDLs, it kind of stops, right? The reason they say that this is a marker for mortality rate, by the way, which is better, let me repeat, Nemo, it is better than the cholesterol because the cholesterol has no relationship to your death. By the way, I work in the ER, I diagnosed 147 heart attacks, okay? Out of those, 113 have something, and 13 have something. 113 have high sugars, only 13 have high cholesterol. That's odds are pretty fair there. So the ApoB is in all the particles that are very large, right? That's why it's a marker supposedly for death, because they include the particles on that protein. Now the little lipoprotein A is the hook of the LDL. If your vitamin E is not what it is, this hook doesn't bind to the cell. So the LDL is going to be around and be able to do things that it shouldn't be doing. So be aware of that. So Nemo, I need to ask Nemo a question. So is it ApoB and little lipoprotein markers for death or heart disease? Let me say that. Yes, they are in the sense because we're not using those fats to what we're supposed to do. Are they better than cholesterol? Cholesterol was never a marker for heart disease. Yes. So little lipoprotein and ApoB are better markers. Not that they're the best, but they're better markers than the other tests. I agree with you, Nemo.
Perfect, thank you. And I think there's been quite a few questions around kind of micronutrients and how they lower LDL and improve transport of.
Nemo, I want to send a slide real quick. Hold on a second, Nemo. Hold on. Okay, Nemo, I'm going to show them something. I am a cheater. I'm a cheater, and I didn't show you guys everything. First of all, I don't know, Nemo, if they can see this slide here. Putting it close to the, what is the damn camera? Hold on a second. Crap, let me see. Can you guys see that slide or not? Those are the ApoBs and the ApoAs. Can you guys see it? I'm going to send you the slide, Nemo. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But I'm going to answer the question that they asked because it's very important. How are the micronutrients important? And I didn't put this slide because I always want to keep my secrets, right? And that's the cholesterol. And I know that's kind of hard to see. You guys can see it?
I have that picture. I'm going to do a screen share now.
Oh, thank you, Nemo. Why didn't you have the other one, Nemo? Okay. So people ask me, what are the importance? Okay, now I'm going to give you my secret. There it is. Okay, if you look at the most important cofactor to convert cholesterol to estrogen or testosterone, it's niacin, vitamin B3. It's the most abundant. But look at the C, look at the E. You require all of them. So if your iron levels are low, you cannot convert pregnenolone to DHEA. So on some people, instead of me giving DHEA, I check their iron levels or their B6 is low. I correct that and the DHA goes up. Ooh, I wonder why. So be aware that that is significant. Also, zinc, if you look at zinc, it's a mineral that is everywhere. It's interesting. Now, if you have high levels of copper, copper competes with zinc. So it's very hard to convert when your coppers are high. Now, our water system is made out of copper. Be aware that almost everybody have a zinc imbalance, not a deficiency, imbalance. I hope that everybody see, I cannot see the people, but can they see that slide? Any questions? I hope they like it.
Yeah, we're getting lots of great feedback. One thing I want to add in is a little nugget of information here. The conversion of cholesterol into pregnenolone relies on L-carnitine. So that's something that I personally use.
Wait a second, how? I agree with you. How, Nemo? Do you know why?
Carnitine helps transport cholesterol into the inner mitochondrial membrane, where it can then.
Absolutely, yes, that is the whole thing. It is a cofactor that is the limiting factor to get into the mitochondria to make. Is a star. Is the enzyme star? Yes, absolutely. Good job, Nemo.
I think a big takeaway from this is just ensuring that you have sufficient micronutrients, that you're eating a whole food diet, that you're supplementing if necessary, in order to support cholesterol conversion
Nemo,
to steroids.
Can we check all these levels with Merrick? We can we?
We have a comprehensive micronutrient
Yes.
panel that you can do a blood test, and you can check these markers and see if you are deficient and if you need a supplement.
Make sure that when you check the zinc, don't check it by itself. Make sure that you get a zinc and a copper on a serum. It's the best one. Don't just do one and then the other. Serum keeps the levels the same. It's better to do it that way.
Perfect.
If you want a true serum for zinc, you can get an RBC zinc. For the magnesium, you need RBC magnesium because only 5% of the magnesium is outside the cell. So I hope that answered some of those questions out there. Nemo, I don't care if you share the slides.
Yeah, I'll send out slides to the guests today. We're coming up an hour, so Dr. Eric Serrano, I really want to thank you so much for blessing us with your knowledge, and thank you to everyone for joining and asking questions and investing into your health. It's so cool to see so many people interested in continued education in this field and taking control of their health.
I appreciate that, Nemo. I usually like to see faces. I hate this Zoom shit, though.
We'll have to do an event soon. So thank you, everyone, and hope to see you guys at the next webinar. Bye all.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nemo, for staying up for me.
No problem. Bye, guys.